Hi there, so in this final lesson on schizophrenia, let's have a look at the interactionist approach. So the interactionist approach is the acknowledgement that there are multiple factors, so therefore not just using biological approach, not just using psychological approach. It's taking into account that more than one thing is happening at once. Okay, this is also known as the biosocial approach, and it acknowledges that schizophrenia may be caused by biological, psychological and societal factors at the same time. The key bit of theory that underpins this is the diathesis stress model, where diathesis refers to a vulnerability and stress refers to a negative psychological experience. So, for example, diathesis could be genetic. It's the idea that this is like a loaded gun, and it's the stress that pulls the trigger and manifests itself as schizophrenia. The main person who started work on this was Meal in 1962, an American psychologist, and what he worked on is the idea of the schizogene, the idea that people with schizophrenia have this disposition because of one gene known as the schizogene. Now, if somebody had the schizogene but didn't experience the requisite amount of stress, they would have a schizotypic personality. Okay, so not full-blown schizophrenia, but underlying traits, etc. Okay, if you don't have the schizogene, according to Meal, it's the idea that you can throw as much stress as you want at this person, they'll never develop schizophrenia. Okay, in terms of a criticism, we say that this is oversimplified, and we'll talk about Ripke, Houston et al. And Reed et al. Why that's an oversimplified model. So in terms of your AO and evaluation, this is an oversimplified model. Supporting case studies from Meal is the Finnish adoption study from Tienari et al. In 2004, and you can find that in an earlier video. Tienari looked at 19,000 schizophrenic mothers from 60 to 79. That's 1960 to 1979, it's not their age, and had a look at the families that their children were adopted into. Okay, and those who were adopted into a dysfunctional family were more likely to develop schizophrenia later on. Also, support for the diathesis stress model is the schizophrenogenic mother, the double bind theory, and high expressed emotion. In terms of our modern understanding and how we have moved on from 1962, we need to have a look at the idea that many genes contribute. And this is Ripke in 2014's study. The word Ripke is missing there, R-I-P-K-E. So it's multiple genes that contribute towards it. Also, there are other studies, such as Ingram and Luxton in 2005. And this is that the previous psychological traumata, plural trauma, may provide diathesis. So it's the idea that the trauma itself may be the thing that introduces the vulnerability and isn't the stress. Now, the way to get our head around this is to look at Reed et al. And explain how this happens. Okay? Psychological trauma affects brain development according to the Reed et al. Study. And what that causes as part of the brain's development is an overactive HPA system. Now, HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal. Okay? So the fact that during brain development, this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system could be overactive. So children who've experienced abuse, adults that have experienced abuse, their brain will be affected in this way. And therefore, rather than that being the stress, that contributes towards the diathesis. The modern definition of stress when it comes to the diathesis stress model is anything that risks triggering schizophrenia. So you may think stress, something like being made redundant or losing your job, etc. Actually, cannabis is a stress factor. Cannabis increases the chance of schizophrenia by 7, so 7 times in terms of that factor. And in terms of the reason why cannabis interferes with dopamine. Okay, so cannabis would be a stress as that example. If we look at treatment In terms of using the interactionist approach, it's the idea that we combine antipsychotic drugs with CBT. So we take the biological approach and the psychological approach, and we use an interactionist model. Okay, now, in terms of Turkington, it's possible to acknowledge that we use the biological approach, but still use CBT. However, you can't use the biology-only approach by saying, do you know what, it's got nothing to do with psychology, tell the patient this and then use CBT. The person has to believe that there is a psychological benefit to using CBT. If we have a look at the world, the UK uses the interactionist approach. It's unusual for CBT alone, okay? It's more common to have antipsychotic drugs alone, but the UK uses cognitive behavioural therapy combined with antipsychotic drugs. In the US, the interactionist approach is not as common. Now, underline the word as, and the reason why is because it's not as common, okay? That doesn't mean it's not used, it just means relatively it's lower. If we have a look at supporting evidence for this, we need to have a look at the study by Tarrier et al. In 2004. And this highlights that the combination approach works. In Tarrier's study, what they looked at is 315 patients, and they used a random allocation model allocating to 3 different groups. Those 3 groups were medication and CBT, medication and supportive counselling, and a control group, where the control group received medication only. And what they found at the end of the trials is groups 1 and 2 showed lower symptom levels. The criticism of this study, okay, would be that on the other hand, there was no difference in the readmission rates. And that is the end of the psychology topic. Thank you.